A tutorial on how to create the one-letter design using the text tool. So this is a pretty easy tutorial, but the project itself is pretty tedious, so it takes some time. So what you're doing is you are using one letter of the alphabet and you are going to repeat it over and over to represent a principle of design. So this is going to be an abstract artwork. Looking at this artwork, you might not be able to tell right away that this is supposed to be an O, and that's what we're going for. It doesn't necessarily have to be clear that this is a letter, like we're not reading it. Same with this one, you wouldn't necessarily guess that this was a bunch of F's over and over and over. So you're going to be creating 3 different designs, and all 3 of those designs will use a different letter and a different principle. So we have emphasis, pattern, movement, and balance. So you can take a look at those definitions later. But for example, emphasis is a focal point. You're creating a focal point in your artwork. So in this one in particular, the E here, the green one, is the focal point because it's a different color. It's a little bit bigger than like these ones down here. So that's just an example of emphasis, but then you choose your own 3 and your own letters to do. So on Photopea, you're going to go ahead and create a new project. So File, New, and you can name this whatever letter you plan to do, or I'll just do one letter design number 1. You can name it whatever you want. Change this to inches. We're going to do 5 by 5. And by the way, if you choose pixels, when you click create, you'll see that you chose pixels because there's going to be a grid, so you'll need to start over. DPI 200 standard, click create. Okay, so we have a box, and to use the text tool, in your toolbar over here, it is down here. And by the way, I want you to experiment with different background colors. So I don't have a lot of variation in here, but like on Google Classroom, you can see some of the other background colors. I would like you to experiment with fonts, background color, font color, all of that kind of stuff to show that you experimented. Okay, so we're going to start with the text tool. So that's the T right here. Go ahead, there's 2 ways to do this. You can just click and type the letter. So if I did T, I could do that. Or you can click and drag to create a bounding box. And the bounding box creates a boundary, so no matter how big, so if I highlight this and I make this bigger, no matter how big I get, it doesn't go past that bounding box, but it's up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. Okay, so on the text tool, you just typed your letter, and if you highlight it, and if you can highlight or double click to highlight, there are up here in the top left hand corner, this drop down list has all the different fonts. So choose one of them to use. I don't care at all which one. This is, sometimes there's other options that's within that font, but you don't have to change that. This is the size, but I'm going to show you a better way to change the size a little bit later on. And then here is the font color. So if you want to, and I would like you to, again, experiment with font colors and things like that. So we got red, and then this isn't quite as important, but this is like paragraph stuff if you want to change that. And then another optional thing is if you click this warp button. By the way, when this window comes up, you can move this around to look at the live preview. Under Style, under that Warp button, you can click this None and change and switch to, you can kind of mess around with some of these, and you can toggle with this. So if you would like to warp your font, you can do that. I am not going to, but that's just an option for you. Another thing is if you want to put multiple letters in, that's fine as well. And then that might make more sense to do the warp with something like that. So it's up to you. I'm still not going to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with one letter. Now go ahead and switch to the Move tool. This is an easier way to make your letter bigger. So if you click and drag from the corner, hold down Shift if you don't want to distort it. So I'm holding down Shift and I'm making it as big as I want. Now with this project, usually I say you have to hold down Shift, but with this one, I don't mind if your text does get a little distorted. Because again, we're not reading this as text and it's not a photograph, so it's okay if it is distorted from the original. So if you remember, if you hover over the corners, you can turn your design. And then what you're going to do is you're going to experiment with size and placement, and you're going to use the transform tool. So maybe I'll put this one at an angle, and then I'm going to duplicate this. So if you remember, Command or Control J is to duplicate. I'm going to pull this over, and then I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to flip this. So I'm going to flip this so that it's symmetrical, and I'm just going to start messing with a design. Now, if you want to get really precise, which you may need to be pretty precise for this project, up at the top here, if you go to View, turn on rulers. So then you have this ruler on the outer edge. Right click on your ruler, and when you right click, you have the option of pixels, but I would do inches. So you can see we have our 5 inches right here, and that helps you figure out where the center is and things like that. Now, if you want to be even more precise, go up to View again and do Show Grid. Now this is like ultra precise. So you can see each line, and that might help you out with making things symmetrical and things like that. If you don't want it, if you're not into that, click View again and you can just uncheck the grid and it'll go away. So at the end, you should have something very interesting like this. Make sure you change the background to be something other than white, and mess around with font colors, size, transform tool, all of that stuff, and then save it as a JPEG and turn it into Classroom when you are all finished.